Fred's hands gripped the steering wheel until the leather bit into his palms, knuckles white and trembling from the intensity of the tension coiling through him. The London skyline had long since slipped behind him, a jagged memory of glass and smoke fading into the gray blur of mist. And ahead, the road stretched wide and empty toward Canvey Island, a ribbon of asphalt bleeding into the distance, flanked by low fields and the occasional thicket of trees bending under the weight of the wind. His speedometer climbed past every sensible limit, each tick upward a muted defiance against the world he had left behind in the rearview mirror. On the passenger seat, a stack of papers shivered with each turn and swerve, the rustle of printed words a constant reminder of what had been taken from Anya, of the case that had been built on shadows and hearsay, of interviews and reports that carried no weight beyond the flimsy assertions of people who had never understood the woman they accused. Each sheet of evidence was a lie, a distorted fragment masquerading as truth, and Fred's mind scrolled through each one in rapid succession, reconstructing the timeline, the contradictions, the spaces where logic had been abandoned, and with every mile he drove, his certainty hardened. If the police could not uncover the truth, then he would be the one to dig it out himself, clawing through the dirt, through the bureaucracy, through the indifference that had allowed an innocent woman to be shackled behind bars. The phone buzzed and the name on the screen pulled a sharp twist of irritation through his gut. Ian Lewis. Fred's jaw clenched, his teeth pressing together as his eyes flicked toward the glowing screen, the instinct to answer warring with the rising heat of his anger. The phone rang again, and again, each chime cutting through the roar of the wind and the engine, a reminder that there were voices in the world who thought reason could reach him, who thought it could penetrate the barrier of fury he had built around himself. And with a low, guttural growl, Fred reached over and flipped the phone face down, letting the light die against the dashboard, letting the buzz fade, knowing he was not ready to hear explanations, apologies, or any carefully chosen words that would try to slow him down. The landscape rolled past in a blur of gray-green fields, dotted with road signs that pointed the way toward the coast, toward the edge of memory, toward Canvey Island, where the water lapped silently against the docks, and the shadows of Anya's family history stretched long and unbroken. It was more than a destination. It was a marker of everything that had been lost, and everything that had to be reclaimed, a place that carried the weight of the lake where Ryan Woodberg had drowned, where truth and grief collided, where questions lingered like mist over the water. The road wound and dipped under the faint morning light, the hum of tires over asphalt echoing in rhythm with his pulse, and Fred pressed harder on the accelerator, willing the car to surge forward faster, to close the distance between him and the answers that waited at the end of the road. He did not care about Ian's voice, his cautions, his insistence on patience, or the hollow authority that might still cling to the detective. Every thought, every fiber of his being was tethered to a single, undeniable imperative. He would reach Canvey Island, and there he would find the truth, whatever it demanded of him. The wind screamed against the car as if trying to push him back. The tires groaned against the wet patches on the asphalt, and the faint scent of rain lingering in the air mixed with the dry tang of the fields. But Fred let it all wash over him without hesitation, his eyes locked on the horizon, his mind a tunnel of focus, his heart a drumbeat of relentless resolve that would not yield until he had taken the first step toward justice, toward Anya, and toward whatever fragments of peace remained for the life that had been stolen from them all. Ian sat behind the wheel, his chest tight, the rhythm of his pulse matching the rapid hum of the engine as the dispatcher's voice crackled in his earpiece, each word slicing through the tense air of his car. Private vehicle, registered to Detective Sergeant Fred Stevenson, last seen heading southeast, past Pitsea, speeding, uniformed but off-duty. Ian's jaw clenched so hard it ached, a physical echo of the dread and frustration spiraling through him. Damn it, Fred. He had expected recklessness, expected a streak of defiance born of anger, but not this. Not driving like a man racing toward some point of no return, ignoring every call and every attempt to intervene. Ian's hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles pressing against the leather. Every sinew coiled as he felt the tremor of fear and responsibility threading through him. Without hesitation, he swerved onto the main road, the tires gripping the wet asphalt with a hiss as he ordered, "Patch me through to the nearest patrol unit." The response came almost immediately through the faint crackle of static, a young voice sharp and professional. "Unit 47, PC Donovan speaking." Ian's voice carried the cold precision of someone who had long mastered command, but beneath it, the heat of worry burned. "This is DI Ian Lewis. I need eyes on a dark blue Audi A6, traveling at high speed toward Canvey Island. The driver is DS Fred Stevenson, and he is not responding to calls." A brief pause followed, the weight of silence crackling across the radio, and Donovan's voice returned, hesitant but firm. "Copy that, sir. We just caught sight of the vehicle on the A101. He's flying." Ian's foot pressed down harder, the acceleration making his car lurch forward, the tires biting into the road as he barked. "Stay on him, but don't engage. I'm on my way." The voice on the other end confirmed, but Ian barely heard it. His focus and narrow, burning line locked on the road ahead, on the shadow of a man barreling toward danger, toward a reckoning that no one could predict. Fred was headed to the last place anyone wanted to be, toward the edges of memory and guilt, toward the lake where Ryan Woodberg had drowned, toward the heart of every question left unresolved, toward the place where truth and grief tangled in cold water. Ian could see it all in his mind, as if the road itself were stretching him across the landscape of Fred's desperation, the fields on either side whispering with the faint, wet scent of early morning rain, the grass bending under the wind, as if bowing to the tension rolling across the highway. Fred was moving with precision born of obsession. Ian's hands tightened again, a reflex to the ache in his chest, and he imagined the set of Fred's jaw, the flare of his nostrils, the quiet, grim calculation in his eyes, as he drove toward the place where memory and rage collided. The patrol officer's voice crackled again, a thread of urgency breaking through the static. "Unit 47, suspect vehicle approaching Canvey turnoff. Orders." Ian exhaled, a slow, measured breath, letting the heat of the wind through the open window brush across his face, the scent of wet asphalt and distant salt water filling his senses. Any officer would have been told to block the route, to intercept, to force the car to a stop. But this was Fred. This was a man Ian had called friend, a man whose focus was now a dangerous, spiraling current that no protocol could tame. He gritted his teeth, his jaw aching with tension, and spoke clearly into the radio. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not stop him." There was a hesitant pause, the uncertainty of obedience in the voice on the other end. "Sir, he's..." Ian cut in with a low sharpness that left no room for discussion. "I know what he's doing. Just keep eyes on him. Let him go through. I'll handle this myself." His fingers tightened over the wheel, the leather sweating under his grip, the engine growling as the car surged down the stretch of highway, overtaking shadows of trees and the occasional glint of a road sign pointing toward the coast. The patrol unit's flashing lights blinked behind him, trailing Fred, but keeping their distance, as if sensing the line Ian had drawn, as if understanding that he alone could carry the responsibility of what was about to unfold. Ian's gaze flicked to the dark blue blur of Fred's Audi in the distance, and he felt the tremor of fear threading through him, an intimate, visceral knowledge of the storm that raged inside the man ahead. Fred's desperation was palpable even from afar, his focus absolute, his body and mind aligned in a singular purpose, and Ian pushed harder, the tires screaming against the wet asphalt, weaving through the sparse traffic with a precision that left his pulse hammering in rhythm with the engine. The outskirts of Canvey Island came into view, the marshlands low and dense, the faint silver gleam of the lake beyond glinting in the fighting sun, and Ian could feel the pull of inevitability tightening around them. He calculated, waited for the moment, then seized it, jerking the wheel with precise timing, surging past Fred's vehicle in a motion that was both confrontation and salvation. The tires squealing, rubber burning against asphalt as he forced the Audi to react. Fred slammed the brakes with a harsh, echoing scrape, and Ian's car followed in tandem, each jolt a tactile hammering against their shared history, their unspoken fears, their desperate drive toward truth. Both vehicles skidded to a rough stop, sending clouds of gravel and dust across the empty road. And for a heartbeat, silence fell between them, heavy with the raw weight of what had already been lost and what might yet be saved. Fred's door burst open, and he was on the ground, moving with the coiled energy of a predator, every muscle taut, chest heaving with heavy, controlled breaths, fists clenched, eyes burning with a storm of fury and determination. Ian's own door slammed shut behind him, the metallic clang punctuating the tension, and he braced for the collision of past and present, for the reckoning that had been hurtling toward them across the miles. Fred stalked forward, the scent of rain and engine oil clinging to him, his voice rising with the force of desperation. "What the hell are you doing?" The words cracked across the empty expanse of road, echoing against the marsh and water beyond, each syllable a drumbeat of anger, of fear, of the fragile line between reason and recklessness. "Get out of my way." Ian met him squarely, his own breath tight, the weight of years and friendship and fury pressing against him. The tension between them was almost physical, a current stretching across the short space between two men who had once been inseparable, now divided by choices, by grief, and by the singular drive to protect, to uncover, to prevent a mistake that could not be undone. He barely flinched. "I am stopping you before you do something you can't take back." Fred's jaw clenched, the muscles rigid beneath taut skin, his eyes wild with the fire of desperation, the pulse of anger visible in the sharp lines of his face, the hands curling into fists at his sides, as if they could contain the tempest raging inside him. "I'm not doing anything except finding the truth," he shouted, each word jagged, strained with frustration. "You know this case is a joke, and now you're standing in my way?" The air between them seemed to vibrate with the intensity of unspoken history, the weight of years, of trust and broken promises, pressing down until every breath was labored and every heartbeat thundered like war drums. Ian held his ground, his eyes locked on Fred's, calm but unwavering. "You're acting on emotion." Fred let out a bitter, rasping laugh, shaking his head in disbelief, the sound raw with accusation and pain. "Oh, don't you dare lecture me about emotions, Ian." Ian exhaled sharply, letting the wind whip through the open space around them, carrying the scent of asphalt and salt from the nearby water. The tension thickened at a taste. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to stop a man from making a mistake that could not be undone. And he let his voice lower, even, measured, anchored. "You're in uniform, Fred. You're still a cop. You know you can't just charge into this like a man possessed." The words were calm, deliberate, almost gentle, but they carried the weight of experience, of knowing the point at which anger transforms into catastrophe. "You think you'll find some missing clue at that lake, that suddenly everything will make sense?" Fred stepped back, just slightly, but the fire in his eyes did not fade, the stubborn insistence of his purpose blazing brighter than reason. His voice cracked under the strain of frustration and unspent grief. "I have to do something." Ian softened just a fraction, the tilt of his head, the slow deepening of his gaze, carrying the smallest thread of reassurance, of shared understanding. "You already did. You got the lawyers on this case. You got people looking at it the right way now." Fred shook his head, hands gripping the leather of his belt, a physical manifestation of every instinct to fight against patience, against the slow grind of bureaucracy. "Not fast enough." Ian sighed, the motion slow, tactile, running a hand down his face as he absorbed the weight of the man before him, the tension of every muscle, every shuddering breath, every tremor of energy unspent. "Listen to yourself. You're running on fumes. You're not thinking straight. If you keep going like this, you're going to make things worse." Fred's breaths came ragged, short and uneven, a storm of desire and desperation pushing him forward, even as Ian's words clawed at the edges of his logic, at the small, fragile sense of reason that had survived the long night and the cold cell of frustration. Ian stepped closer, careful, deliberate, his voice lowering again, soft but firm, the tether in the storm. "Turn around, Fred. Let's go back. We'll fight this as a team, but not like this." For a long, suspended moment, silence stretched between them, the wind whistling along the empty road, rustling the edges of grass and salt-stung air, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of distant water, the scent of engine oil and heat and tension, all wrapped into one living pulse. For the first time, Fred hesitated, a tremor passing through his body, despite the continued clench of fists, a flicker of doubt threading through the unrelenting momentum of his fury. The small, nagging voice of reason Ian had drilled into him over years of friendship and partnership, a voice almost lost beneath the roar of anger, finally began to pierce the storm. He knew Ian was right. He hated that Ian was right. With a final, sharp exhale, Fred pivoted, stalking back to his car, the keys to his agency and his purpose clutched tightly, the leather stiff beneath his hands as he yanked open the driver's side door and slid into the seat, knuckles pale and trembling from the tension, gripping the wheel as though it were the only anchor left in a chaotic world. Ian watched, silent and steady, before nodding to himself and slipping back into his own car, the engine responding instantly as the vibration hummed under him like a living thing. Without exchanging a word over the radio, both men moved as one, the road ahead opening into the promise and peril of action, a shared understanding binding them, even as silence held dominion. The ride back to London was tense and taut, a river of thought and anticipation flowing through the confined spaces of metal and glass, the silence between them charged with the weight of what had been said and left unsaid, the engines humming in parallel, a low, resonant pulse beneath the tension. When Fred finally pulled into the headquarters parking lot, shut off the engine, and stepped out, his body still wired, the simmer of frustration beneath his skin, every step heavy with the residual energy of anger and determination, Ian followed him through the doors, leading silently toward the office that had become a stage for necessity and unspoken truths. As soon as the door closed, Fred turned sharply, voice low, but carrying the urgency of every unspent emotion. "Tell me you've got something. Tell me you've done anything to fix this mess." Ian exhaled slowly, expected it, and moved behind his desk, arms crossing over a chest taut with tension, his gaze even and controlled. I spoke to the lawyers, he said. Anya's hearing is officially scheduled for next week. Fred's entire body tensed, the pressure in his shoulders, the grip of his hands, the set of his jaw, betraying the hunger for action he could not yet seize. That's too long. She shouldn't be in there another day, let alone a week. Ian raised a hand, a gesture of quiet assertion, measured, deliberate. I know, but this is the best they could do. The case is built on shaky ground, but bureaucracy doesn't move fast, Fred. Fred ran a hand through his hair, pacing the length of the office, the movement punctuated by the metallic click of boots against the floor, a rhythm of impatience and raw need. There has to be a way to speed it up. Pressure someone. Call in favors. Something. Ian shook his head slowly, the weight of knowledge pressing on him, the tension of restraint threading through every movement. I tried. The judge assigned to her case is by the book. No special treatment, no exceptions. Fred slammed a fist against the desk, the sharp rattle reverberating in the room, a physical exclamation point to his frustration. So, we just wait? Ian's gaze met his with quiet steadiness, anchored in the certainty of method. We prepare. Fred exhaled sharply, the sound ragged, uneven, a release of everything coiled and taut within him. And Ian made a choice, slow and deliberate. He stepped closer, eyes swept the room to ensure they were alone, and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, cold object, the metal glinting under the office light, the keys to Anya's cell. He pressed them into Fred's palm, fingers closing over them with a tacit weight of trust and necessity. Fred's eyes snapped up, a mix of confusion, cautious hope, and barely contained urgency burning within them. Ian spoke low, a whisper threading through the charged air. Go to her. Stay with her as long as you can. Fred's breath caught, the briefest hitch, and Ian held his gaze, steady, measured, the quiet gravity of his next words anchoring the moment. And make her E. Fred swallowed hard, gripping the keys as though they were a lifeline. He did not speak, did not thank him in words, but the brief, knowing glance between them said everything. Without hesitation, he turned, moving with purpose, the office shrinking behind him as he stepped into motion, the world narrowing to the task ahead. Ian exhaled heavily, letting the weight of the risk, the breach of rules, and the tension of their choices settle against him. He was breaking every protocol, bending every limit, but for once, the certainty of doing right overrode every consideration of consequence, and he did not care.